Hey guys, welcome back. Okay, first of all, huge thank you to everyone who liked, subscribed and watched my last video. I can't believe how many people DM'd me or dropped a comment or emailed me. It's been incredible. Thank you guys so much. I really hope that you managed to get something out of it, and I can't wait to do the next parts of this series. Okay, so this is not the part 2 you've all been waiting for. I apologize. I really apologize. There's been a lot of problems in the meantime. Unfortunately, the footage I recorded of the second part of the build series was completely lost when my phone decided to have a meltdown and die on me. It means I had to get a new camera, set everything up, get a new kit and start from scratch. Now that is definitely coming. Believe me, it is definitely coming. It's still huge on my list, obviously, with pushing GBWC out a year. Yay, we get extra build time, but there's a lot less time constraint on that, so I'm making sure it's worthwhile. The rest of the series is definitely coming. It's definitely on its way. I do ask that you be a little patient. Give this series a shot. This is a separate series. It's targeted at a slightly more intermediate audience, anyone that's actually done a bit of scribing before. But the rest of that will totally be happening, and I have some great new suggestions from you guys to add to that I actually can't wait to film, to be honest, but we'll get there. If you like this specific one and this delivery methodology, please let me know. It's great, because I have literally around 200 and something photos that I obsessively compulsively took for this purpose. If you don't, well, sucks to be me, and I'll figure something else out. Okay, so today we're gonna figure out how to take a boring foot like this and turn it into the new hotness, like this. I mean, it's better, right? It's a little better. It's a little. I often get frustrated when I watch other people's videos because they're too, not necessarily complex, but very fast-paced. They're not well delivered. They're more of a, watch me and hope you can figure it out. So I thought, what if someone took those semi-complex ideas and broke them down into easy-to-follow step-by-step guides, or an easy-to-follow step-by-step approach that you could apply to anything. That is ideally what I've accomplished here. I mean, it's going to be up to you. You've got to tell me that, right? So if you like this or not, please leave me some feedback and tell me why you do or don't like it. I want to tailor this approach as much as possible, so that you guys can pull a huge amount of learning out of it, or hopefully at least a tidbit, something that's useful to you and actually tangible that you can then apply to your hobby going forwards. I really appreciate any and all feedback you give me. Thanks guys. Hey guys, I just want to say I am sorry for how long this video has taken to come out, and that it's not the second part of the other one as expected. You guys have been ultra patient with me. My family was hit pretty hard with COVID and lockdown. We're doing alright now. I just really hope that everyone out there is safe and really doing everything they can to make sure their families are safe as well. It's so important that everyone you know and love is safe throughout this crazy ass time, and I know a lot of you in the US are really struggling at the moment as well. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe. All that being said, let's stop with the personal waffle and get into it. Alright, starting off at the toes, because I leverage a stencil technique here, which is pretty much what I use for the vast majority of things that I ever customize. What I typically do is I will pre-cut shapes or any of the very specific and detailed parts like the notch here, and then I will use CA glue to stick it to the product or the toy or the model that I'm working on, and then I'll trim it to shape from there, usually using the structure of the piece itself to help shape the rest of the stencil. One interesting call out here is I used a 6mm piece of tape here to ensure that I get a consistent distance from the front of the sloped parts of the feet. And the reason I did that is to ensure a coherent shape when I swap it over into the other side. Here you can see that I've cut it now down to shape. As I said before, I kind of cut along the edge of what I'm trying to shape, so the model itself provides the structure for the cuts. and that way I usually take a slightly blunted knife and take it down the edge to trim off the excess, and then I gently file or sand it back into place. This gives me a really consistent stencil that matches perfectly to the structure of the other piece, so it really helps with symmetry. Now that that's done, we start the actual scribing process. Now anytime you have some kind of ditch, divot or notch like this one, I would suggest starting in the absolute middle or the most bottom point of that notch, and then do the upper side parts here and here. What that does is it gives you consistent points for your next scribe line to attach to, which gives a far more rigid and sharp corner when you connect all the dots effectively. It sounds more complex than it is. Essentially you're just going 1, 2, 3, and then do 4 and 5. It's easy. So this is where things get a little more complex. I tend to try and find ways to use the structure of the piece to guide what I'm doing, and that way even if I lose a stencil or if I screw up and I can't remember a measurement or something like that, I can then usually guesstimate or find out how I did things. In this instance, I actually put a piece or two pieces of 6mm tape down. One from the edge of the toe scribing, which you see here, and it would point towards the bottom of the foot, and I then used the opposite corner on the opposite side of the tape to create the angle. This was just luck, and I found a good place to anchor it, and it looked good. Then what I did was placed a secondary piece over the top going in this direction, and that gave me a really nice intersection and line that I thought matched the aesthetic I was going for. So that's the same deal, right? It's easy to repeat on both sides of this foot and on the other foot. And then what I did was I placed the third piece of tape, which is what you're looking at here, so apologies for not having the other ones. And it goes from this corner to this corner, because again, it's an easy structural match and it's an easy line to do. The rest of this is pretty simple. I literally came in and wanted to expand, or I guess kind of deepen some of the lines that were there to add some visual interest instead of the same width of line just being everywhere. So I went back over it with a slightly thicker chisel, whichever one you prefer. I used a 0.3, I believe, here, here, and all the way along this piece to really make that part pop out and separate when I paint it. Okay, so this is where we start getting a little weird. Similar principles to what we had before. I'll be using a stencil, and I'll be using kind of tape aligned with structural elements to try and get consistency. For this part, it gets a little fiddly because of the angles involved. I just kind of sketched here roughly what I wanted to see or what I thought might look good, which is what I do on every piece, to be honest. I kind of sketch it, erase it, sketch it again, erase it, and then I find something that looks good and balances with the rest of the things that I have going on. There's no science to it. It really is just visual interest and what you think looks good. So once you have a design you like, you really need to bed it down and sketch it in properly. In this instance, I didn't start scribing straight away. I thought it was probably better that I cleaned the design up and made sure it still worked. Again, the favorite of mine apparently is using a 6mm piece of tape, and I lined it up with the bottom edge of the foot that you can see here. And the reason I did that is because it ensured a consistent line. And when I say consistent, I mean visually it looks like it's aligned to the rest of the kit. Essentially, if you screw the line up, at least the line looks like it's made as part of the kit. So it's a little trick that I do all the time. It just removes a little human error and makes sure that at least visually it looks like it's meant to be that way. And now we're doing the exact same thing with the bottom line. Luckily, 3mm tape worked really well to line up with the bottom of the foot, as well as the bottom of this vent here. Anytime you can have a line corresponding, or I guess extending an existing piece of the structure or detail, it just looks all the more credible. So definitely try and do that where you can. Now, here I am just chucking some tape on because I thought, hey, look at that, it lines up with the bottom of the foot. It's around 6mm. It's nice and easy. But then I thought, ah, shit, I probably won't be able to, or at least I will screw up trying to mirror that exactly on the other side. So then I proceed to measure the distance from each edge so that I can get a far more consistent line when I have to repeat it 3 more times, right? So I wanted to keep this in here just so you can see that it's not just me making this up as I go, it's literally me screwing up and going, hey, here's a better idea. So instead I decided to measure them so they're far more consistent. Here's the lower measurement and here's the upper measurement. I did these using a digital caliper. If you don't have one, please buy one from the hobby drop or the hardware store or anywhere local. Just get one. You won't believe how much more professional it looks even doing basic modifications when you've measured it correctly. It's insane. So now I have those measurements. I literally just use a pin to mark the holes for the diagonal line. This also serves as the start point for the lines extending from here as well. So I just mark here, then here, and then we proceed to scribing. Now, I thought this was important to include because I notice a lot of people don't do this. I tend to use some kind of pin. I have created the Ultra Ghetto device up here, which is essentially a mechanical pencil with like a sewing needle in it. Super inexpensive. There are some brands that sell a size 0 scribing tool. Same deal. A sharp hole punch, or just a toothpick won't work, but maybe the point of a very sharp knife. Same deal. Just have a dot where your line is going to start and or end, and it gives you a very natural finishing point. So then we literally just use a piece of tape, which also exactly happens to line up to where I had the tape before because I'm an idiot, and scribe the diagonal line. I do the diagonal line first because then I ensure that the line is super clean and it doesn't look weird or unbalanced where it is, and then I scribe the other areas off of that, like so. I just added tape and did 1 and then 2. Every time you do a line like this, once you've got all 3 lines there, gently use the scribing tool to run the entire passage like this. So, I really didn't have much of an idea of how I was going to do this stencil nicely because the area is super awkward to work on. What I ended up settling on was to just blob a piece of plasticard or styrene or whatever you want to call it on there, re-sketch the design, and basically I just went like this. And then from here I just proceeded to try and cut it off with a sharp knife and shape the styrene sheet while it was on the model. That then gave me a perfect stencil. With this one it was a bit awkward because of the vent cut as well, but because the styrene sheet can be easily flipped, the vent cut just serves as what we would call a key to put it exactly in the same place when we swap it and use it on the other part. From there it's a simple case of gently scribing down the stencil until you have the depth of cut you want and you're good to go. One other thing I did on here, which is super simple but ultra fiddly at this scale, was just to add a piece of tape here to try and get a line along the back of the heel that corresponds to the newly cut side ones. You could leave this off, it's just me being a little anal retentive, but I find that if you do that, it tends to make them look like 2 separate pieces, and when they're painted up, you can do them in completely separate colors to, again, further amplify the custom work. So for the ankles, I wanted to add some detail here to draw the eye to them as well, otherwise I felt like they just kind of faded away. In this instance, same deal. I just added a piece of styrene sheet, drew the design I wanted. In this case, I wanted a piece of 3mm tape on the side so that I could make this piece stand out. And that's purely because I want to paint that up in metals, because I think it'll really help draw the eye to this piece. And then I flipped it, and then I did the same on the other side using the same stencil and the same piece of tape. And that's it.